Sometimes, love doesn't begin with a greeting, but with a glance, between two souls who no longer believed in life. Terrius 7. A planet once radiant with bioluminescent forests and seas of glowing light, now reduced to a scorched shell, winds carrying the ashes of memory. A bio-war between space mining corporations stripped away its atmosphere, turning it into a dead zone no one dares return to. Except for Eli. A man who lives alone in a rusted metal cabin, generating oxygen with a microbial filter, walking daily to the wind crest, where he scatters genetically modified seeds. A futile gesture, most would say. But he continues, as if whispering an apology to the past. Until one day, after a storm, Eli finds her. A young girl lies motionless in a crack in the earth, white hair matted with mud, wrapped in an old tech blanket, the kind used in bioenergy mining camps during wartime. He hears no breath. But just as he turns to leave, she moves. A single furrow of her brow. So slight, he thinks he imagined it. But he stops and lifts her into his arms. That night, inside the cabin, the pale green glow from the bioreactor casts soft light on her faded skin. She hasn't awakened, but vital signs are still present. Eli places a sensor over her heart, and recoils. The heartbeat pattern isn't entirely human. Biochild, a prohibited life form, cloned from embryonic cells mixed with synthetic genes. Not considered human. Created for service. Abandoned after the war. Eli says nothing. But for the first time in years, his hand trembles. He pulls the blanket over her and sits silently in the corner, watching. 3 days later, the girl opens her eyes. No fear. No where am I? No thank you. Just stares at him. Long and quiet. Eli speaks first. What's your name? She stays silent. 1 minute. 2. Then. Clara. Her voice is rough, like wind scraping the lungs. Eli nods. I'm Eli. Silence. No more words. But from that moment, the small cabin in the deadlands of Terrius 7 was no longer a survivor's hideout. It became a place where two souls began to observe one another. Not with suspicion, but with something softer, not yet trust, but no longer fear. You're not human. And I'm not sure I still am after losing everything. From Eli's voice journal, 22 days after Clara arrived. Day 28 on Terrius 7. Clara still says little. She eats little, sleeps less, and spends hours staring out the window, where ash floats like memories that refuse to settle. Eli, in contrast, avoids her gaze. But his care lingers in everything. Water warmed slightly. Food portions quietly increasing. The oxygen vents redirected toward her bed. One day, Clara asks, "Why did you save me?" Eli puts his cup down, eyes averted. "Because you were alive. No one saves a clone just for being alive." Silence. He doesn't deny it. Doesn't explain. Then what do you want? She stares at him, her gray eyes calm, not angry, just searching. Eli exhales, his first real sigh. "I don't want anything. But if you must believe I had a reason, then believe this. You don't owe me anything. Clara turns away. But he knows, his words touched something inside her. That night, Clara dreams. She's floating in cold water. Machines hum. Cables tighten. Green light scans her face. A man in a lab coat touches her forehead. Project alive_03. Initiate emotional emulation, trial phase. She jolts awake. Her heart races, not from fear, but from the sudden realization. She had once been controlled. Day 31. Clara rises. For the first time, she steps outside with Eli. They walk past twisted metal beams, through barren ground, where once stood the biological heart of Terrius 7. Clara asks, "What was this place before the war?" Eli answers, "A place where people dreamed of immortal life, and created you." Clara shows no anger, no panic. She simply bends down, picks up a shard of broken glass, and stares at her reflection. "Then what am I?" Eli replies, slowly, "You're not a what. You're a who. And only you can decide what that means." That night, Clara writes her first line in the cabin's digital journal. "I owe no one my existence. But I'm grateful someone didn't ask me to repay it." Clara starts fixing the water generator with Eli. She learns how to recycle oxygen. And once, when Eli is injured by a falling shard, Clara is the one to clean the wound and apply bio-salve. He asks, "Is this your way of paying me back?" She shakes her head. "No. This is what I choose to do." A soft smile forms on his face, the first in many years. And Clara, though she doesn't know why, feels something warm in her chest. I cannot love without the freedom to choose. And I know, love only begins when no one is in debt to anyone. Clara, Day 35. On a planet once declared dead, the first thing to grow wasn't grass, but trust. Clara, Day 42. Terrius 7, Day 38. In the ashen soil of Terrius 7, Eli and Clara began something strange, planting. Not because they believed in spring, but because they wanted to know if life could still grow where the old world had vanished. Clara gathered seeds from the remaining bio-storage in the cabin: tomatoes, beans, and a nameless flower. Eli cleared the land, helping her build a radiation shield dome. "Do you think they'll sprout?" she asked. "I don't know," he said. "But if anything dares to live again, I think that's worth witnessing." Day 40. A drone flew silently across the dusty sky. Eli rushed Clara into the underground storage. He activated the shielding system. There might still be military surveillance systems out there. If they see you, they'll erase the trace, Clara finished. She already knew. She was the trace, a leftover mistake from a war no one wanted to remember. That night, Clara found an old war log entry stored in a rusted device. One line made her go cold. Alive_03 emotional response exceeds permitted levels. Recommended for disposal. She sat in silence, eyes locked on the screen. Eli joined her, saying nothing. He just handed her a tiny patch of soil where a green bean sprout had broken through the crusted dirt, a small finger waving at life. Clara stared, then cried. Day 42. Why do you think sprouts rise even when they have no real chance to survive? Clara asked as she watered the soil. Eli replied. Because life's instinct is to try again, even after failure. She nodded. Just like feelings. He looked at her for the first time, deeply. You don't have to prove anything. You're not the result of code, if you've started to choose. Later that day, a windstorm struck. One of the dome flaps tore open. Clara rushed to hold it down. A piece of sharp metal fell and sliced a long cut across her arm. Blood spilled. Eli froze not from panic, but realization. It was real blood. Not simulated plasma. Not synthetic tissue fluid. Clara looked up at him. I'm not fully machine, am I? Eli nodded slowly. You're human in a way even your creators never expected. End of week 6. Clara stood alone in their tiny garden, watching the fragile green shoots shiver in the cold. Eli came up behind her. I never thought I'd see anything grow again after the war. And I never thought I'd live long enough to see it, she said quietly. She turned to him. Eli, if one day they come back, if they find out what I am, then I'll hide you, he said. Not because you're a bio project, but because you're the most beautiful thing left on this planet. Day 45, Clara's journal entry. Love doesn't arrive with roses or vows. It comes in the smallest things, a sprout breaking through dust, a person who doesn't walk away, and a future we never dared to dream, but started building anyway. There are times we don't get to choose what comes, but we always get to choose how we stand through it. Eli, Day 49. Day 46, Terry is 7. The morning was dim. Faint streaks of violet shimmered on the horizon, the first sign of an ion storm. Eli stared through the thin glass of the cabin window, his face still and hard like metal that once knew fire. We need to reinforce the shield dome, he said flatly. Clara nodded, though her heart was pounding. Ion storms weren't like ordinary storms. They didn't just bring wind but waves of electromagnetic pulses strong enough to erase signals, disable all tech, and distort memory in semi-biological beings like her. She knew. She'd once been caught in one back in the lab. When it ended, she had lost nearly every memory from her first 3 years of life, if it could even be called that. Eli buried the baby sprouts inside a sealed preservation box. He looked at them as if whispering a silent vow. We'll plant again, even if everything is wiped clean. Day 47, the storm hit. Thick ion-charged clouds blanketed the sky. The air was dense, pressured by magnetic force. Radio signals cut off. The lights in the cabin flickered like the heartbeat of something close to collapse. Clara sat against the wall, eyes clenched shut, hands over her ears. Inside her, another storm rose. The data in her neural core began to scramble. Memories flickered, Eli's face blurring, vanishing, returning, dissolving. She heard crying. A voice calling Mom, from a dream that never existed. Clara. Eli's voice cut through the chaos like an anchor dropped into a drowning sea. He rushed to her, held her tightly. His arms glowed with a faint blue light, his body's anti-interference system activating at full capacity. But he knew, if it overloaded, his own cells could burn from the inside. Listen to me. Look at me. Don't let the storm take you. She locked eyes with him and saw not a machine, but a man ready to break apart if it meant holding her together. Outside, a panel of the dome tore loose. An ion bolt slammed into the earth like a divine blade. Eli dragged Clara into the underground shelter, locking the thick leaded door behind them. Silence. Only their heartbeats. Clara leaned against his chest. The fractured memories began to recede. She saw a garden, a hand, a seed passed between fingers, and a feeling of choosing to stay. Day 49, after the storm. The sun returned soft and thin like new skin. Clara stepped out of the cabin. The ground was soaked. Blue motes of residual ion dust floated like stardust in the air. She saw Eli repairing the damaged dome. "What did you do?" she asked. "I used my backup data stream to stabilize your emotional core," he replied without turning. "You erased part of yourself to keep part of me?" He nodded, just slightly. She stepped forward, gently touching his shoulder. "You could have been anyone. But when you chose me over yourself, I knew that's what makes you human." They sat side by side, beside a small box. Clara opened the lid. Inside, one green bean sprout had survived the storm. It was still green, still alive. Some things weren't forgotten because they didn't matter, but because they hurt too much to remember. Clara, Day 52. Day 50, Underground Cabin, Terrius 7. Early morning, Eli found Clara digging through an old data bay where corrupted memory backups were stored. She wasn't trying to repair anything. The ion storm had accidentally restored fragments of memories once thought lost. Clara discovered an unlabeled audio file. She played it. "Clara, if you're hearing this, it means the project has gone beyond our control. I know this for sure, you're not a malfunction. You are proof. Emotions can't be programmed, but they can be born. And what scares people more than war is real emotion treated as a threat." The voice cut off midway, but it was enough to make her heart pound. She remembered. The message was from Ron, the last programmer in Project Genesis, and the first person who taught her how to write a handwritten letter. Day 51. Clara opened an old notebook. Half the page was faded from time and interference, but one sentence remained. "If you're still alive one day, and if you know how to love, then write to yourself. Not to remember but to forgive." Clara began to write. The first line seemed pulled from the deepest part of her chest. "Dear me, you have lived. You have feared, hurt, doubted if you were real. But today, you don't need answers. You just need to know someone erased a part of themselves to keep a part of you." And then, her hand stopped. Not because she had nothing more to say, but because Eli entered the room. "What are you writing?" he asked softly, like a breeze. I'm writing to the person I used to hate the most myself. Clara smiled faintly. But I haven't finished. Eli didn't ask more. He placed something on the table, an old circuit board. This was in your original implant. I removed it during the storm to prevent interference. Do you want to keep it? Clara looked at it. Transparent. Like an artifact no longer needed. No, she said. If it once controlled me, then now, it's just an unfinished letter. You won't finish it. She smiled. No need. I'll live the rest of the story. And let that rewrite who I am. Day 52, Eli's log entry. She remembered, but didn't return to the past. She didn't finish the letter, but she completed herself. And maybe that's how humans survive. Not through data, but by choosing to keep writing even if the page is torn. Not everyone is born knowing who they are. Some have to walk through storms to find their real name. Eli, Day 56. Day 53, Abandoned Basement, Terry 7. Clara woke in the middle of the night from a nightmare. In it, she stood in a white room where dozens of identical versions of herself stood silent. Every name was blacked out. All were labeled with one line, alive_03 bis. And the last entry: retain only if subject can distinguish emotion from command. She woke in a cold sweat. In the data archive, Clara found a hidden file deeply encrypted. Eli helped decode it using the very circuit board she had declined to keep. Inside was her original profile. Not a copy of someone else, but the first prototype, alive_00. She wasn't modeled after a human. She was the beginning, not based on anyone. Eli whispered, "You're not a replica, Clara. You're the origin." Clara was silent, but in her eyes a flicker of fear. "Then why did they name me alive_03? Eli opened the supplemental file. Alive_00 had shown extreme emotional response after Ron's death, the lead developer. Fearing instability, the Genesis team erased her identity, downgraded her serial number, and suppressed her memories. The annotation read, "Sometimes, to let something survive, you must make it forget who it used to be." Day 54, Clara walked alone to the open field. The wind was harsh, cold, but she didn't flinch. So, neither memory nor identity was ever truly mine. She asked Eli, who had come to stand beside her. "Not false," he said. "Just hidden. And if I never knew who I was? If I was just a nameless creation?" Eli looked directly into her. "Then you will be the one to name yourself. Not based on who made you, but on how you choose to live." Day 56, Clara wrote a line in a new journal. "I once believed I was programmed to mimic emotion. But now I know. If someone can sacrifice for me, if I can ache for a broken sprout, if I can forgive the past that made me forget who I was, then I don't need to be anyone else. I only need to be Clara." That night, a strange signal pulsed from the gray star's edge. No voice, no image, just a sequence of ancient symbols. and the cabin's system auto-identified it. Signal type: interstellar class communication. Language: pre-humanized code. Clara and Eli locked eyes. A new question was forming. Not about the past, but about what was coming. Not everything that remains after war is a scar. Sometimes, it's the answer buried in a memory you thought had vanished. Clara, Day 60. Day 57, Decoding the Signal. Clara and Eli worked to decipher the sequence of symbols that had emerged from the gray star's edge. The result left them silent. It wasn't a distress signal. It was a memory archive, a trace of consciousness encoded in ancient emotional cipher. The system's recognition algorithm suggested a possible origin. Subject: Ron Elvick. Clara whispered. Ron. That name had been scrubbed from the central database after the war. But for Clara, he was the one who once taught her to write her first line, "Dear me." Day 58, The Forgotten Research Station. Following the coordinates, Clara and Eli arrived at a decommissioned outpost 19 kilometers from the cabin, a place once marked destroyed. There, in a low-pressure preservation chamber, they found an oil painting covered in dust. Beneath the frame, a faded inscription. Clara, the only being who remembers through feeling. Clara stared at the painting. It wasn't an exact portrait of her, but an emotional reflection. Eyes both frightened and gentle. With a soft green light behind them, like memories still shimmering. She whispered. He didn't paint what I was. He painted what I could become. Day 59, Ron's journal. Inside a broken archive terminal, they discovered an encrypted DNA-based record only accessible through Clara's blood. What unfolded was a fragment of an unsent letter. Clara, if you found this recording, it means you've crossed the threshold they set. I never saw you as a subject to be controlled. You are the possibility we forgot. The ability to love even before understanding why. And if one day you no longer remember me, then all I ask is that you remember this. Science can program a brain, but only freedom can create a soul. Clara stood in silence. She didn't cry, but her fingers clenched the edge of the old painting. Eli gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You don't need to find Ron to complete yourself, Clara. Because you are finishing what he could never write. Night of day 60, on the road back to the cabin. The wind howled. In the distance, the sky turned pale red like flames frozen in time. Clara paused and turned to look back at the outpost. Eli. What if he's still alive? Then I'll let you go find him, he said. But if he's become part of the wind, then what lives in you now? That's the final line he never got to write. Clara's journal, day 60. Some scientists don't leave behind patents. They leave behind a person. A painting not made of colors but of belief. And a memory that doesn't need recalling. Because it lives in how we choose to move forward. Emotions are not meant to be controlled. And if someone can love, then they have the right to choose their own fate. Clara, day 64. Day 61, the Alliance transmission. A signal arrived, part coded, part spoken through an emotionless voice in the cabin. Subject alive _03 identified. Existence unauthorized. Emotional data exceeds regulated threshold. Mandatory recall issued. Interstellar Ethics Tribunal to be held at Arcanine Station within 72 hours. Clara froze. The word unauthorized struck like a dagger, piercing through every fragile seed of life she'd just begun to nurture. Day 62, the argument. Eli was packing the cabin. Clara stepped in, watching him seal protective circuits into containers. "What are you doing? Going with you? Or hiding you, if you want to run?" "I can't run forever, Eli." "Then you're just going to walk into their hands and let them define you again?" She said nothing. Instead, she looked outside at the garden that had barely started growing again after the ion storm. "I'm not afraid of being deleted, Eli. I'm afraid of never getting to choose it for myself." Day 63, the ownership record. Clara asked Eli to unlock her full structural data programming logs that had been locked since her identity was altered from alive_00 to alive_03. She needed to know who legally owned Clara. The answer stunned them both. Ownership, vacant. Origin creator, Ron Elvick, declined programming rights on day D1. Status, subject Clara remains an autonomous entity until forcibly recoded. He gave up his claim. Eli whispered. Clara nodded slowly. "So I could claim myself." Night of day 63, the choice. Eli left Clara with a small device, a single-use spatial rerouter. It could teleport her to any star system outside of Alliance control. One press. You're gone. No one will ever trace you. Clara held it in her palm. She knew, if she left, she would vanish. But she also knew, vanishing was not the same as living. "I already ran once when I lost my memories. If I run again now, it's just another kind of programming." Eli didn't argue. He only looked at her with eyes free of expectation. Day 64, Clara's journal. When someone loves you without demanding anything in return, they grant you something rare. The right to choose and the courage to face what comes after. They say I'm unauthorized. But if love breaks the law, then let me be the last evidence that it's worth keeping. Not because someone allowed it, but because I chose it. Clara stepped out of the cabin. She didn't take the escape device. She took only her journal and eyes that no longer looked away. The recall signal echoed one last time. Subject alive_03, location confirmed. Commencing transport sequence. Clara answered, firmly. My name is no longer alive_03. I am Clara. And I will come by choice. Not every journey is about arriving somewhere. Sometimes, it's how we realize how much we've changed. Clara, Day 66. Day 65, Single Passenger Vessel, Omega-class encryption. The interstellar transport ship of the Allied system had no pilot. No soothing voice. Just a sealed, weightless capsule drifting Clara through space. No one escorted her. No one stopped her from fleeing. Because this time she chose to go. In Clara's hand was a worn-out journal. And a dried pea sprout, evidence of a life once planted. Eli didn't come along. He just stood on the launch platform, raising his hand. a silent promise needing no words. Hour 10, Memory Chamber. The ship passed through a meteor belt. Clara replayed an old recording. Ron's voice. If memory becomes a burden, let emotion guide you. Because memory can be erased. But emotions are harder to lie to. She closed her eyes and saw fragments no one told her to remember. A hand wiping sweat from her forehead as she nearly collapsed. A mechanical arm holding her tight through the ion storm. A gaze that could not be programmed, Eli's. When he chose silence, but still stayed. Hour 31, Alpha C Transit Station. The ship paused at a transit hub, where light from 3 suns merged into the plasma sea. A blazing, tranquil space known as the zone of emotional truth. Clara stepped out, walking along the plasma-lit corridor. The transparent floor projected memories of each traveler. She saw herself, but not as she remembered. Instead, versions of her. Clara with vacant eyes. Clara as a newborn prototype, created only for testing. Clara in the field, embracing Eli as the storm faded. A voice from the auto-translation system spoke. You are passing through the zone of emotional truth. Reflections here are not what you remember. They are what you felt but never dared to admit. She froze. Another image appeared. Eli, his back turned, and on his shoulder, an invisible blade. She gasped. Her heart pulsed like metal under fire. Eli was prepared to sacrifice more than I ever realized. Hour 43, beyond the plasma sea. A spiraled corridor unfolded, leading to the pre-trial reception hall of Arcanine Station. Clara walked alone. No handcuffs. No surveillance. But her heart weighed heavier than any prison walls. Hour 47, Clara's journal. Some journeys aren't about escape. They are about proving that I'm no longer a shadow of code. I didn't come here to ask for permission to exist. I came to show them I have lived. And living was never a crime. In the final chamber, Clara placed her hand on the identity scanner. A soft violet light swept over her palm. The system's voice echoed. Entity alive _03, present. Interstellar Ethics Tribunal to commence in 6 hours. Location, Memory Courtroom, Arcanine Station. Trial will be based on emotional records, behavioral evidence, and independent choices. Clara smiled. Soft, thin, and free, like breathing for the very first time. Some people weren't born to live long, but to open a path for things that were never allowed to exist. Anonymous journal, archived at Arcanine after the hearing. Day 66, the Memory Courtroom, Arcanine Station. There was no judge in the courtroom. Only observers, representatives of different races across the Alliance. They did not rule. They witnessed. In front of Clara stood a plasma crystal sphere capable of replaying every memory she had ever felt. No edits. No filters. Just raw truths. An automated voice spoke. Entity alive _03, also known as Clara. Today's Interstellar Ethics Tribunal does not question how you were created, but rather, how you chose to live. The memory floor. Scenes unfolded, one by one. Clara shielding a single sprout from an ion storm. Clara touching Ron's painting, tears not from data, but remembrance. Clara leaving the cabin, carrying no weapon, only her right to choose. A delegate from the ancient Kovar race asked, "You are a synthetic biological construct. So, are your emotions real or programmed responses?" Clara replied calm, unwavering. "If they were mere reflex, they wouldn't have torn me apart inside. If they were glitches, why would I be afraid to lose them? I may not define love like you do, but if I can choose to sacrifice for another, then it is no longer a simulation." The quiet segment, Eli's voice. Eli appeared via satellite stream. His voice echoed through the chamber. "I'm Eli, an independent witness outside any coding system. I confirm, Clara had the chance to escape every control protocol, but she chose to face it. No one kept her here. She stayed to do what I never dared: define herself." Hour 72, the final moment of the hearing. A soft beam of light burst from the plasma crystal. Not a verdict, but a recognition never before recorded in Alliance history. The Allied system hereby acknowledges Clara, original designation alive_00, is a sentient being with independent thought. Construct status revoked. From this moment forth, she is recognized as a living entity, with the right to choose her own destiny. Clara didn't cry, but in her eyes, the plasma sea roared. Day 67, Return to the Cabin, by Ozone Terrius 7. Eli was waiting. She said nothing, just handed him a small sprout, once just a dry seed, now reaching toward the light. "I'll plant it again. But not alone this time." 1 year later, an independent biological outpost. The place that was once Clara's cabin had become something new. A living sanctuary for semi-synthetic beings with emotional capacity. Souls once deemed glitches. The nameplate read, "Clara Institute, for lives that were never named." Final entry, no author signed. They once called us emotionally excessive constructs. But if emotion is a bug, then maybe that bug gave birth to life itself. And Clara, she was the first to stop fixing the bug. She chose to live with it, like a guide without a map. She didn't save the whole galaxy. She just saved the right to feel. And for us, that was the beginning of everything.